I never thought a simple decision to come home early would shatter my world forever. The moment I opened the door, the music was blasting, laughter echoed through the house. But upstairs, my son was fighting for his last breath, while his wife was celebrating like nothing was wrong. I had just returned from my sister's place in Chicago, 2 days earlier than planned. The flight was exhausting, but I wanted to surprise Michael, my only son, for his 30th birthday. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed cars parked haphazardly, the kind you see at a wild party. Strange, because Michael hated crowds. The front door was unlocked. The second I stepped inside, the smell of alcohol hit me. Pop music thumped from the living room, where a dozen people were dancing, drinks in hand. My daughter-in-law, Jessica, stood in the center, laughing as someone handed her a shot. She didn't even notice me, but something felt wrong. My stomach tightened when I saw the staircase. Michael's medicine bottle, the one for his heart condition, was lying on the steps, pills scattered everywhere. My heart raced. I pushed past the crowd, ignoring the confused stares, and ran upstairs. His bedroom door was slightly open. The room was dark, but I could hear ragged, uneven breathing. When I flicked on a light, my legs gave out. Michael was on the floor, his face pale, lips blue. His hands clutched his chest like he was trying to keep his heart from exploding. He gasped when he saw me, his eyes begging for help. And downstairs, the party kept going. The moment I saw Michael on that floor, time froze. His skin was clammy, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps, each one weaker than the last. I dropped to my knees, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my phone. The 911 operator's voice sounded distant, like I was underwater, as I screamed for an ambulance. But even as I begged for help, the music downstairs pulsed louder, the bass vibrating to the floor like some sick joke. I grabbed Michael's wrist. His pulse was thready, barely there. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then, just as the operator told me to stay calm, his eyes locked onto mine, filled with something worse than pain. Fear. Real, raw fear. And then he whispered a single word that made my blood run cold. Jessica. Why would he say her name? I whipped my head toward the door, half expecting her to burst in, but the hallway was empty. The party raged on below us, laughter mixing with the thumping music. How could no one hear me screaming? How could Jessica not notice her own husband was dying right above her? Then I saw it. On the nightstand, next to an overturned glass of water, was a crumpled piece of paper. My hands trembled as I grabbed it, smoothing it out. It was a note, Michael's handwriting messy and rushed, like he'd written in a panic. If you're reading this, she did it. Check the safe. The combination is... The rest was smudged, unreadable. My mind raced. What safe? What did Jessica do? The questions burned in my chest, but there was no time. Sirens wailed in the distance, still too far away. Michael's breath hitched, his body jerking once before going terrifyingly still. No! I pressed my ear to his chest. Nothing. I started CPR, counting compressions like my life depended on it. Maybe it did. Because if Michael died here like this, with that note in my hand, his wife parting below us, then nothing would ever make sense again. Just as my arms began to ache, footsteps pounded up the stairs. I turned, expecting paramedics, but it was Jessica. She stood in the doorway, her party dress glittering under the bedroom light, her face flushed from dancing. For a second, she just stared at Michael's lifeless body. Then her eyes flicked to the note in my hand, and she smiled. Not a relieved smile, not a shocked one. A cold, calculated smirk that made my stomach drop. Jessica, I choked out, "What did you do?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her pocket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out her phone. "You shouldn't have come home early, Margaret," she said, her voice eerily calm. Then she lifted the phone to her ear and spoke 2 words that sent a new wave of terror through me. "He's gone." Who was she talking to? Before I could react, the sirens outside cut off abruptly. No screeching tires, no slamming doors, just silence. Jessica's smile widened as she stepped back into the hallway. "Wait!" I lunged forward, but the bedroom door slammed shut in my face. The lock clicked, and then from downstairs, the music stopped. Everything was quiet, too quiet. That's when I heard it. The soft creak of footsteps on the stairs. Not just one person. Several, coming toward me. The footsteps grew louder, each creak of the wooden stairs sending a fresh wave of panic through me. I threw my weight against the door, but it didn't budge. Jessica must have locked it from the outside. Michael's body lay motionless on the floor beside me, his face already taking on that awful waxy pallor of death. The note crumpled in my fist felt like the only piece of sanity left in this nightmare. I pressed my ear to the door. The footsteps had reached the top of the stairs now, moving with purpose toward the bedroom. There were at least 3 distinct treads, heavy, like men's boots. Why weren't they announcing themselves as paramedics? Why wasn't anyone shouting for help? Then I heard Jessica's voice, hushed but urgent. Hurry up before she... A deep male voice cut her off. We need to make this clean. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't a rescue. This was something else entirely. I scanned the room desperately for a weapon, an escape, anything. The window, maybe I could force it open. But when I yanked at the frame, it didn't move more than an inch. Painted shut, the doorknob rattled. Acting on pure instinct, I dropped to the floor beside Michael and closed my eyes, going limp. If they thought I was unconscious too, maybe I'd have a chance. The door burst open. Through my barely open eyelids, I saw 3 figures enter. 2 large men in dark clothing, and Jessica hovering behind them. One man knelt beside Michael, pressing fingers to his neck. He's gone, the man confirmed. Jessica let out a sigh that sounded more like relief than grief. Good. Now help me with her. Rough hands grabbed my arms. I fought to keep my muscles slack as they rolled me onto my back. One of the men leaned close, his stale coffee breath washing over my face. This the mother? Yeah, Jessica said. She wasn't supposed to be here. The man's fingers pressed against my wrist, checking for a pulse. I focused on breathing slowly, evenly, even as my heart threatened to pound out of my chest. Out cold, he announced. Must have fainted from the shock. Jessica's high heels clicked across the floor toward me. I could feel her standing over me, studying me. Then, impossibly, the toe of her shoe nudged my side hard. I barely suppressed a gasp of pain. Should we, take care of her too? One of the men asked. The silence stretched. My entire body tensed, waiting for Jessica's verdict. Finally, she sighed. No, not yet. We need to think this through. Just get Michael's body in the van first. Make it look like an accident. The men moved away, and I heard the rustle of a body bag being unzipped. Tears burned behind my closed eyelids as they began handling Michael's lifeless form with all the care of movers shifting furniture. Then Jessica's phone buzzed. She answered with tense. What? A pause. Then her voice went strange. Wait, what do you mean they're here? One of the men froze. Problem? Jessica's voice dropped to a whisper. The police. They're at the end of the driveway. How? We killed the sirens. I don't know, but we need to go. Now. Footsteps pounded toward the door. At the last second, Jessica hesitated. I could feel her staring at me again. Then she leaned down, her lips nearly brushing my ear. I know you're awake, Margaret, she whispered. And if you ever want to see your granddaughter again, you'll keep your mouth shut. The threat hit me like a physical blow. My granddaughter, little Emily, just 4 years old. Jessica's own daughter. What had she done? Before I could react, Jessica straightened and hurried out. The door slammed shut behind her. A second later, car engines roared to life outside, tires screeching as they peeled away. I waited 5 full minutes before daring to move. When I finally opened my eyes, the room was empty except for me and the faint indentation on the carpet where Michael's body had lain. Then, from downstairs, a new sound. The front door crashing open. Police? Anyone here? I opened my mouth to call out, then froze. Jessica's threat echoed in my mind. Emily's face flashed before my eyes. What had I just stumbled into? The police officer's flashlight beam cut through the darkness as I stumbled down the stairs, my legs shaking so badly I had to grip the railing for support. The house was eerily silent now. No music, no voices, just the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. The party debris, red plastic cups, half-eaten finger foods, a high-heel shoe lying on its side. Looked grotesque under the flashing blue police lights coming through the windows. Ma'am. The young officer's eyes widened when he saw my disheveled state. We got a 911 call about a medical emergency. My mouth opened, but no words came out. How could I explain what just happened? That my son's body had been taken by strangers while his wife watched? That they threatened my granddaughter? The note in my pocket suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Then I noticed something odd. The officer wasn't alone. Behind him stood a woman in a navy pantsuit, her badge clipped to her belt. Detective. Her sharp eyes scanned the room before landing on me with unsettling intensity. "Mrs. Wilkinson?" she asked, though I hadn't given my name. "I'm Detective Reyes. We need to talk about your son." How did she know who I was? Before I could respond, my eyes caught movement outside the front window. A shadowy figure darted between the police cars. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought it was one of Jessica's men coming back, until I recognized a small frame and familiar purple backpack. Emily, my granddaughter, was outside, hiding behind a patrol car. Her wide eyes locked on me through the window. She pressed a finger to her lips in a clear SHH gesture, then pointed frantically toward the kitchen. The detective followed my gaze. "What are you?" "Bathroom," I blurted, cutting her off. "I think I'm going to be sick." I bolted for the kitchen before they could stop me. The kitchen was dark, the only light coming from the digital clock on the microwave. 11:47 p.m. It felt impossible that only 2 hours ago I'd been on a plane, excited to surprise Michael for his birthday. Now he was gone, his body stolen, and his daughter was... A small, cold hand grabbed mine from behind the kitchen island. I nearly screamed before realizing it was Emily, her face streaked with tears, her Dora the Explorer pajamas dirty and torn at the knee. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Mommy's not my real mommy." "What?" Before I could process this bombshell, Emily shoved something into my hands. A small pink USB drive shaped like a cat. The kind kids use for school projects. "Daddy gave me this before the bad men came. He said only you can open it. The numbers are on your birthday card." My mind reeled. What birthday card? What was on this drive? And what did she mean about Jessica not being her real mother? A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Emily's eyes went wide with fear. She pressed the USB into my palm and whispered one last terrifying thing. "They killed Daddy because he found out about the babies." Then she was gone, slipping out the back door like a shadow just as Detective Reyes entered the kitchen. "Mrs. Wilkinson?" The detective's voice was laced with suspicion now. "Who were you talking to?" I clenched my fist around the USB, feeling the plastic edges dig into my palm. "No one. I was praying." Her eyes dropped to my closed hand. A beat passed, then another. The microwave clock ticked over to 11:48. "Ma'am," she said slowly, "I think you need to come down to the station. There are some things about your son's activities that you should know." Activities? What was she implying about Michael? As she guided me toward the front door, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Detective Reyes wasn't wearing a wedding ring, but there was a distinct tin line on her finger, and peeking out from under her jacket cuff was the edge of a tattoo I recognized, the same unique Celtic knot design Jessica had on her wrist. Coincidence? Or was a detective somehow connected to my daughter-in-law? The USB drive burned in my hand. Whatever secrets it held might be the only thing standing between me and whatever terrible truth had gotten Michael killed. But first, I had to survive whatever game Jessica and maybe this detective were playing. As we stepped onto the porch, a black SUV rolled slowly past the house. The window was down just enough for me to see Jessica in the passenger seat, her eyes locked on me, her mouth curved into a smile that promised this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The police station's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects as Detective Reyes led me into a cramped interrogation room that smelled of stale coffee and sweat. The metal chair screeched against the floor when I sat, the sound setting my teeth on edge. My fingers kept finding the USB drive in my pocket, tracing its edges like a worry stone. That and Emily's terrified whisper, "They killed Daddy because he found out about the babies," played on a loop in my mind. Detective Reyes set a thick file folder on the table between us with deliberate slowness. "Mrs. Wilkinson," she began, her voice suddenly dripping with false sympathy that made my skin crawl. "I know this is difficult, but we need to talk about your son's extracurricular activities." She flipped open the folder to reveal surveillance photos of Michael entering a nondescript office building downtown. The timestamp read 2 days ago, the day before I'd flown in. "That's the FDA regional office," she said, watching my reaction closely. "Your son had filed several complaints about his wife's medical practice before his unfortunate passing." My breath hitched. Jessica was a pediatrician, or at least that's what she claimed. But these photos showed Michael sneaking around like some kind of spy, not a grieving husband filing routine complaints. Reyes leaned forward, her Celtic knot tattoo peeking out again as she tapped another photo. This one of Michael handing an envelope to a gray-haired man in a lab coat, Dr. Edmund Hayes, head of the FDA's fertility drug division. Interesting friend for a car mechanic to have, don't you think? The pieces started clicking together with terrifying clarity. Michael wasn't just a mechanic. He'd been an Army medic before leaving the service. He knew medicine, and if he was meeting with FDA officials about Jessica's practice, a sudden knock at the door interrupted my racing thoughts. A uniformed officer handed Reyes a note. Her eyebrows shot up as she read it. Then she gave me a look I couldn't decipher. Well, this changes things. She slid the note across the table. It was a coroner's preliminary report. Subject, Michael Wilkinson. COD, acute cardiac arrest, suspected poisoning. Note, high levels of digoxin detected. Prescription in wife's name. Digoxin, heart medication. The same pills I'd seen scattered on the stairs. But the bombshell came in a handwritten addendum at the bottom. Decedent's blood work shows chromosomal abnormality inconsistent with biological paternity of child EW. Suggest follow-up. Emily wasn't Michael's daughter. The room spun. All those years of watching Michael dote on Emily, the way his face lit up when she called him daddy, had he known? Was that what got him killed? Reyes's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and for a split second, raw panic flashed across her face before she schooled her features. "We're done here," she said abruptly, standing so fast her chair toppled over. "Officer Daniels will take you home." Something was wrong. Very wrong. As I was escorted out, I caught a glimpse of Reyes's phone screen before she tucked it away. A text from someone named Jay. They found the files. "Clean this up now." The ride home was a blur. Officer Daniels kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror like I might explode. When we pulled up at Michael's house, now a crime scene crawled with forensic techs, he finally spoke. "Ma'am, you should know, we found something in the basement." My stomach dropped. Michael had always been paranoid about the basement, insisting it was unsafe and keeping it locked. Even Jessica hadn't had a key. Daniels swallowed hard. "There's a clinic down there, fully equipped, with records on dozens of women." He handed me an evidence bag containing a single sheet of paper, a list of names with dollar amounts next to them. At the top, in Jessica's perfect cursive, was a heading that made my blood turn to ice. Subject payments, Generation 37. And then I saw it, near the bottom of the list. E. Wilkinson, $250,000. Emily's name. A scream built in my throat as a final horrifying realization hit me. That USB drive wasn't just evidence. It was a key to something much bigger. And Jessica would burn the world down to get it back. The moment Officer Daniels left me alone in Michael's ransacked living room, I rushed to the hall closet where I'd stored my suitcase, the one containing the birthday card Emily had mentioned. My hands shook so violently I could barely turn the combination lock. When the suitcase finally sprang open, the bright pink envelope sitting atop my clothes seemed to glow in the dim light. Michael's last birthday card to me. I tore it open with trembling fingers, nearly ripping the card in my haste. The printed message inside was generic. To the world's best mom, but Michael's handwritten note below made my breath catch. "Mom, no matter what happens, remember our fishing trip at Cedar Lake when I was 12. You taught me the real meaning of family that day. Love you forever." Cedar Lake. That's where Michael had caught his first fish, a tiny sunfish he'd insisted on releasing, because it had a family too. But why would he reference that now? Unless my fingers traced the edges of the card until I felt it, a nearly imperceptible thickness near the bottom. Carefully peeling back the decorative layer revealed a hidden compartment containing a single slip of paper with a string of numbers. 615-125-19-31545. The USB password. I barely had time to process this when the floorboards creaked behind me. I whirled around to find Emily standing in the hallway, her face streaked with dirt and tears, clutching a stuffed rabbit I hadn't seen since she was a toddler. "They're coming back," she whispered. "The bad ladies with the needles." Before I could respond, headlights swept through the front windows. A car door slammed. Emily's eyes went wide with terror as she grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "The basement," she hissed. "Daddy said to show you if things got bad." We barely made it down the stairs before the front door burst open. From our hiding spot beneath the staircase, I heard Detective Reyes' voice barking orders. "Find that USB!" And the old woman, she knows too much now. Emily tugged me deeper into the darkness. What I'd assumed was a solid wall swung open at her touch, revealing a hidden passage even police had missed. The air inside smelled of antiseptic and something metallic. My stomach churned as Emily flicked on a light switch. The room that blinked into existence wasn't a basement. It was a laboratory. Stainless steel examination tables, refrigerated units with vials of blood, a wall of file cabinets with labels like subject lineage and generational markers. But what made my legs give out was the enormous genealogical chart dominating the far wall, with Emily's baby photo at the bottom of a branching tree that stretched back decades. At the very top, a black and white portrait of a severe-looking woman in 1940s clothing bore the inscription, Astor's founder, Generation 1, Subject 0, asterisk. Emily pressed a button on a hidden console. A monitor flickered to life, displaying a paused video of Michael. When I hit play, his recorded voice filled the room, hushed and urgent. Asterisk, Mom, if you're seeing this, I'm probably dead. Jessica isn't who she says she is. None of them are. They're part of a eugenics project called Generation 37, a decades-long experiment to breed what they call perfect humans. They recruit doctors, police, even government workers to help cover it up. Emily isn't our biological daughter. She's one of their designer babies, genetically selected and placed with monitored families. Asterisk, the screen cut to security footage of Jessica injecting something into an 4-bag. I caught her switching fertility medications at her clinic. They're not helping women get pregnant. They're implanting embryos with edited DNA. The payments in the basement, those are the women who agree to carry these designer babies. But some, like Emily, get placed without consent when the mothers don't survive delivery. A crash upstairs made us both jump. Michael's recording continued. The USB has names of hundreds of children like Emily across the country. It's the only copy. Jessica's people will kill to get it back. There's a safe house in. The video cut off as the basement door flew open. Detective Reyes stood silhouetted in the doorway, gun drawn, her Celtic knot tattoo now clearly visible in the fluorescent light, an exact match to the symbol at the top of the genealogical chart. Margaret, she said with a chilling smile, let's talk about your granddaughter's true purpose. Emily's small hand slipped into mine as Reyes stepped forward, revealing the syringe in her other hand. The truth was worse than I'd imagined, and we were trapped with it. The fluorescent lights in the hidden laboratory flickered as Detective Reyes took another step toward us, the syringe in her hand glinting under the harsh glow. Emily's fingers tightened around mine, her small body trembling like a leaf in a storm. I could feel her rapid pulse where our skin touched, the frantic rhythm matching my own galloping heartbeat. The air smelled sharply of antiseptic and something else, something coppery and thick that made the back of my throat burn. Reyes tilted her head, her smile widening in a way that didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. You don't understand what Emily is, Margaret, she said, her voice smooth and patronizing, like she was explaining a simple math problem to a child. She's not just some little girl. She's a culmination of 37 generations of precision genetic engineering. Imagine what her DNA could do for medical science, for humanity. I stepped in front of Emily, blocking her from Reyes's view. My legs shook, but my voice didn't waver. She's a child, I spat, not some lab experiment. Reyes sighed, as if disappointed by my ignorance. Sentimentality always was your weakness. She flicked the syringe with her fingernail, a clear liquid sloshing inside. This will make her sleep. No pain, no fear, just compliance. A soft click sounded behind me. I didn't dare turn, but Reyes's eyes flicked past my shoulder, her smirk faltering for the first time. Emily's grip on my hand loosened, and then a deafening bang shattered the silence. Reyes jerked backward as the basement's overhead sprinklers burst to life, drenching us in icy water. Alarms blared, red emergency lights flashing in strobes that turned the room into a nightmare of shadows and blood-red light. Emily yanked me toward a ventilation grate I hadn't noticed before, her voice barely audible over the wailing sirens. Daddy showed me, she shouted. The grate gave way with a screech of metal, revealing a narrow tunnel just wide enough to crawl through. Behind us, Reyes cursed, slipping on the wet floor as she scrambled to follow. Emily went first, her small body disappearing into the darkness. I hesitated just long enough to grab a scalpel from a nearby tray before plunging in after her. The tunnel smelled of mildew and something sour, the walls pressing in so tightly I could feel the rough concrete scraping against my elbows. The sprinkler's water had seeped in, forming shallow, freezing puddles that soaked through my clothes. Somewhere ahead, Emily's rapid breathing echoed, guiding me forward. Then a fork in the tunnel. Emily didn't hesitate, veering left. This goes to the neighbor's yard, she called back. But as I turned to follow, something clamped around my ankle. Reyes's fingers dug into my skin like talons, her nails drawing blood. Her face, half lit by the flashing alarms, was twisted into something inhuman, pure, unhinged rage. "You ruin everything," she snarled. I kicked back blindly, the scalpel still clutched in my hand. There was a sickening thud, a gasp, and then the pressure on my ankle vanished. I didn't look back. The tunnel ended at another grate, this one opening into a storm drain behind a neighbor's shed. Emily was already there, her small hands prying at the rusted hinges. Together, we forced it open, tumbling out into the rain-soaked night. We ran. No plan, no destination. Just away, 2 blocks over. We ducked into an all-night laundromat, its flickering neon sign casting eerie blue light over rows of silent washing machines. Emily collapsed against the dryer, her chest heaving. I knelt in front of her, brushing wet hair from her face. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, but her eyes were distant, haunted. "They'll never stop looking for me," she whispered. I pulled her close, my mind racing. The USB was still in my pocket, the numbers from the birthday card. The videos cut off mention of a safe house. We had pieces, but not enough. Then Emily stiffened. "Grandma," she breathed, pointing to the laundromat's fogged-up window. A black SUV rolled slowly past, its windows tinted, its license plate obscured by mud. But I didn't need to see inside to know who was hunting us. The laundromat's fluorescent lights buzzed like angry hornets as I watched the black SUV disappear around the corner, its taillights bleeding red into the rainy night. Emily pressed against me, her small body trembling not just from cold, but from something deeper, a fear no child should ever know. The USB drive burned a hole in my pocket. Its secret's the only thing standing between us and whatever nightmare Reyes and Jessica represented. I pulled out the crumpled slip of paper with the numbers Michael had hidden in my birthday card. Asterisk 6151251931545 asterisk, and stared at them until my vision blurred. Numbers to letters. A simple cipher any child could solve. F6, O15, L12, E5, S19, C3, O15, D4, E5, full code. Not a password, a name. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Dr. Maria Foles was Michael's old Army medic instructor, the woman who'd written his recommendation for medical school before he dropped out to become a mechanic. She lived off-grid somewhere in the Blue Ridge Mountains, or at least she had when Michael last mentioned her. Was she the safe house? A sudden vibration against my thigh nearly made me jump out of my skin. Jessica's phone, the one I grabbed from the kitchen counter during our escape, lit up with an incoming call from a blocked number. I almost declined it until Emily's tiny hand shot out, her eyes wide. "Answer it," she whispered. "It's the good doctor." How did she? I swiped answer and held the phone to my ear without speaking. A woman's voice, hushed but firm, came through. "Margaret, listen carefully. You're being tracked through Emily's implant. You have 17 minutes before they triangulate your position." My blood turned to ice. "Implant?" The woman continued. "There's a gray Ford Taurus parked behind the laundromat. Keys under the mat. Drive to the coordinates I'm about to text you. And whatever you do, don't let Emily fall asleep." The line went dead. A second later, the phone buzzed with map pin. A remote location 53 miles northeast. Emily was already moving toward the back door, her movements too precise, too aware for a 4-year-old. "We have to go now," she said, and there was something in her voice, a cadence, a weight, that didn't belong to a child. The Ford started on the first try, its headlights cutting through the downpour as we peeled out of the alley. Through the rear-view mirror, I saw the black SUV round the corner again, this time speeding up. Emily buckled herself in with steady hands, then reached into her mouth and pried out a back molar with a grimace. Beneath the fake tooth was a tiny metal chip. She rolled down the window and flung it into the night. "The implant's a lie," she said matter-of-factly. "They track us through our teeth." I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles cracked. Who was this child? The answer came as we merged onto highway. Emily leaned over and pressed a small button on the USB drive. A holographic display flickered to life above the dashboard, a global map dotted with hundreds of pulsing red lights, each one labeled with a name, a birth date, a generation number. Emily pointed her own blinking, asterisk, subject E37, cognitive enhancement, active, asterisk. Then the car's collision alarm blared. Headlights filled the rear-view mirror, the SUV now inches from our bumper. As it rammed us, Emily's final words before impact shattered everything I thought I knew. "Grandma, I'm not a designer baby. I'm the prototype, and you're the only one who can keep me alive." The world turned upside down in a screech of twisting metal as the SUV rammed us again, sending our car spinning across the rain-slicked highway. Emily's scream cut through the chaos as we careened toward the guardrail, the holographic map flickering violently before vanishing. My head slammed against a window as we flipped, once, twice, before coming to rest on the roof, the smell of gasoline and burnt rubber thick in the air. Dazed, I turned to Emily. Blood trickled from her hairline, but her eyes were frighteningly clear, her small hands already unbuckling the seatbelt with eerie precision. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice too calm for the wreckage around us. "We have 30 seconds." Through the shattered windshield, I saw the black SUV skid to a stop. 3 figures emerged, not Jessica or Reyes, but men in tactical gear, their faces obscured by black masks. The leader raised a device that beeped rhythmically, sweeping it toward our wrecked car like a metal detector, looking for the tooth tracker Emily had discarded. She grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. "Play dead until I move," she breathed against my ear. Then her body went limp, her eyes fluttering shut with such perfect imitation of unconsciousness that my own survival instincts kicked in. I let my head loll forward, my breathing shallow. Boots crunched on glass. A flashlight beam passed over my face. Elderly female unresponsive. One man muttered. Subject E37 appears. Emily moved like lightning. 1 second she was lifeless. The next she'd snatched the scalpel from my pocket and slashed it across the nearest man's thigh. As he crumpled with a shout, she jammed the blade into the second man's hand, sending his weapon clattering to the pavement. The third operative raised his gun. A gunshot rang out, but it didn't come from him. The masked man dropped, a dark bloom spreading across his chest. The other 2 whirled toward the tree line where the shot originated. Another crack. The second man fell. The last operative turned to run just as a figure emerged from the shadows. A woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair, a hunting rifle braced against her shoulder. Dr. Maria Foles looked nothing like the photo Michael had shown me. Deep lines etched her face, and her left arm ended in a prosthetic below the elbow. But her eyes, sharp, calculating, locked onto Emily with something between awe and sorrow. "You're more advanced than they predicted," she said, her voice rough. Then to me, "Get in the truck. Now." We barely made it to her rusted pickup before more SUVs appeared in the distance. Dr. Foles floored it, veering onto a dirt road that wound into the mountains. Emily sat between us. Suddenly a child again, her hands shaking as she clutched her stuffed rabbit. "They activated me too soon," she murmured, more to herself than us. The dreams weren't supposed to start until Generation 38. Dr. Foles' jaw tightened. "What dreams, Emily?" The little girl looked up, her eyes glistening with tears that somehow seemed ancient, the ones where I remember being other people. The truck swerved slightly as Dr. Foles processed this. I stared at Emily, my stomach churning. "What does that mean?" Dr. Foles answered for her, her voice grim. "It means Generation 37 isn't just about engineering perfect humans. It's about recycling them." She tapped her temple. Emily is not the first consciousness in that body. They found a way to transfer neural imprints, memories, skills, even personalities from deceased subjects into new vessels. The USB drive in my pocket suddenly felt heavier. All those names on the map, not just test subjects, containers. Emily's small hand slipped into mine as headlights appeared behind us again. Her whisper chilled me to the bone. "Grandma," some of the voices in my head know where we're going, and they're angry. The pickup truck's headlights carved through the dense forest as Dr. Foles navigated the winding mountain road with practiced precision, her prosthetic hand gripping the gear shift with mechanical clicks. Emily sat curled between us, her breathing steady but her eyes darting rapidly beneath closed lids, as if watching some internal movie only she could see. The USB drive in my pocket pulsed with a faint warmth that couldn't possibly be real, yet I swore I felt it thrumming against my thigh like a second heartbeat. "They're hurting us," Dr. Foles muttered suddenly, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. The headlights behind us had multiplied. 3 sets now, maintaining an exact 50-yard distance no matter how she accelerated. They want us to reach the coordinates. Emily's eyes snapped open, her pupils dilated so wide they looked black. "Because the answers are there," she said in a voice that wasn't entirely her own, deeper, more resonant, with an accent I couldn't place. "In the cradle where I was born." The truck lurched as we hit a pothole, the impact jostling loose a manila folder from under Dr. Foles' seat. Photographs spilled across the floorboard. Grainy surveillance shots of Jessica meeting with military officials. Blueprints for a facility labeled Site Aurora. And most chillingly, a child-sized incubation pod with a serial number E37. I reached for them, but Dr. Foles grabbed my wrist. Her real hand was ice cold. "You need to understand something before we arrive," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Emily isn't the first child they placed with your family." The words hung in the air like gun smoke. "What?" Dr. Foles kept her eyes on the road, but her grip tightened. "Your daughter, the one you lost to SIDS at 6 months old, that was no accident. She was generation 35. They extracted her for showing unstable markers." The world tilted. That tiny coffin. The small pink dress we'd buried her in. All these years, I blamed myself for not hearing her cry that night. A high-pitched alarm shrieked from Emily's mouth. Her back arched violently, her tiny fingers clawing the dashboard as her head whipped toward the tree lean. "Ambush left!" she screamed in that unnatural voice, just as muzzle flashes erupted from the darkness. Bullets riddled the passenger side, where my head had been seconds before. Dr. Foles wrenched the wheel hard right, sending us fishtailing toward a rusty gate materializing through the trees. As we crashed through it, the pursuing vehicles inexplicably slowed, their headlights fading into the distance as if repelled by some invisible barrier. The truck skidded to a halt in front of a derelict observatory. Its dome collapsed like a rotten eggshell. Emily went limp between us, her breathing ragged. When I lifted her chin, her eyes were her own again, terrified and confused. "Where are we?" she whimpered. Dr. Foles killed the engine, the sudden silence oppressive. "Ground zero," she said grimly, nodding toward the ruins, where they cracked the first successful neural imprint in 1987. She reached under her seat and produced a pistol, checking the magazine with practiced ease. "And where your son hid the one thing that can end this." A metallic clank echoed from the observatory's ruins. Then another, and another, rhythmic, deliberate, the sound of something or someone dragging itself toward us through the rubble. Emily suddenly grabbed my face with both hands, her tiny fingers trembling. "Grandma," she whispered urgently, "you need to remember, what did Michael always say about the stars?" The memories surfaced like a buoy in a storm. Michael at 6 years old, pointing to the night sky. "The brightest stars are already dead, Mom. Their light's just catching up." A figure emerged from the observatory's shadow, a hunched silhouette with an uneven gait. Moonlight glinted off a familiar Celtic knot pendant as Detective Reyes stepped into view, her left leg clearly broken, her face a mask of blood, but her gun hand was steady. "Margaret," she rasped, "you need to run. Now." Behind her, the ruins began to move, dozens of pale, emaciated figures crawling from the rubble. Their eyes reflected the moonlight like cats. Generation 1 through 36. And they were hungry. The moment those pale figures began shambling from the ruins, the air itself seemed to curdle with the scent of decay and formaldehyde. Dr. Foles shoved the pistol into my hand and grabbed Emily, her prosthetic fingers clicking as they adjusted to cradle the trembling child. "The pendant," she hissed at Reyes. "Give it to me now." Reyes stumbled forward, her broken leg dragging grotesquely. Up close, I could see the truth. Her pupils were blown wide with the same unnatural blackness that sometimes overtook Emily's eyes. Blood dripped from her nose in a steady stream, staining the Celtic knot pendant at her throat. "Too late," she gasped. "They're already waking up the others." A guttural moan cut her off as the nearest figure lurched into the moonlight. It looked human once. Now its skin stretched taut over protruding bones, the flesh mottled with surgical scars, and the telltale marks of prolonged cryogenic freezing. Its mouth opened, revealing teeth filed as sharp points, and it spoke in a voice like grinding glass. "Where's our replacement vessel?" Emily suddenly went rigid in Dr. Foles' arms, her spine arching so violently I heard vertebrae pop. When her eyes flew open, they were completely black. No iris, no white, just endless darkness. The voice that came from her mouth was a chorus of whispers, layered and dissonant. "We are here." The creatures froze. Then, as one, they bowed. Dr. Foles took advantage of their momentary stillness to drag us backward toward the observatory entrance. "Listen carefully," she whispered, her breath coming in ragged bursts. "That pendant isn't just a symbol. It's a neural dampener." Reyes was trying to suppress her hitchhiker when she crashed. She nodded to Emily, whose head now lolled at an unnatural angle, those black eyes tracking something beyond our perception. But Emily, she's different. She's not just carrying imprints. She's a control unit. The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. The way Emily had known about the ambush, the combat skills, the sudden shifts in speech patterns. She wasn't just a prototype. She was the central hub. Reyes collapsed against the observatory's rusted doorframe, her fingers scrabbling at the pendant around her neck. "Take it," she gasped. When they realized she can't sustain the network. A shriek cut through the night as one of the creatures suddenly lunged, its elongated fingers brushing my arm. The contact sent a jolt of paralyzing cold through my body, like liquid nitrogen injected directly into my veins. I barely managed to raise a pistol and fire, the bullet taking the thing's jaw clean off. It didn't even flinch. Dr. Foles kicked open the observatory door, revealing a spiral staircase descending into absolute darkness. "Down!" she ordered. "Michael's failsafe is in the—" Emily's scream drowned out the rest. She thrashed violently, her small body convulsing as the blackness seeped from her eyes like ink, forming tendrils in the air that connected to each of the advancing creatures. The whispers became a roar. Generation 38 must commence. The ground trembled. From the depth below came an answering vibration, a deep resonant hum that set my teeth on edge. Dr. Foles paled. "Oh, God," she breathed. "They've already activated the cradle." Reyes suddenly grabbed my shoulder, her fingers like ice. "The numbers from your birthday card," she gasped. "Say them backward before you reach the bottom." Then, with shocking strength, she shoved me toward the stairs just as the first creature reached her. I didn't see what happened next. Dr. Foles dragged me into the stairwell as metal screeched behind us, Reyes sealing the door from the outside. The last thing I heard before the darkness swallowed us was Emily's voice, now terrifyingly calm. "Grandma, you need to wake up." Then the humming rose to a deafening crescendo, and the walls themselves began to bleed. Thick, black fluid oozing from between the stones, forming words that slithered and reformed before my eyes. "Welcome home, Margaret." And below it, in smaller letters, Subject 0. The black fluid dripping down the walls thickened into viscous ropes as we descended, the humming vibration growing stronger with each step until it resonated in my bones. Dr. Foles moved like a woman possessed, her prosthetic hand scraping against a stone wall with a metallic screech that set my teeth on edge. Emily floated between us, not walking, not carried, but suspended in that eerie darkness radiating from her eyes, her small body twitching as the whispers continued pouring from her mouth in languages I'd never heard but somehow recognized. At the base of the stairs, the tunnel opened into a cavernous chamber that stole my breath, not from its size, but from its contents. Dozens of glass incubation pods lined the walls, each containing a floating humanoid figure connected to pulsing umbilical cords of that same black fluid. But these weren't the emaciated creatures from above. These were perfect specimens, muscular, symmetrical, their faces frozen in expressions of serene emptiness. Generation 38. And at the center of the room, on a raised dais, stood a single open pod, waiting. Dr. Foles staggered to a control panel crusted with dried blood and began typing furiously. "The numbers," she barked. "Backwards, now." My lips moved automatically. Asterisk, 5403915-16. Asterisk. The moment the last digit left my mouth, the entire chamber shuddered. The pod's fluid drained away with a wet slurping noise as the figures inside began to convulse. Emily's floating body suddenly dropped into my arms, her eyes clearing just long enough to lock onto mine with desperate recognition. "It's in the tea," she whispered hoarsely. "Your special tea." Then the memory hit me like a freight train. Michael, at age 8, handed me a clumsily wrapped box of chamomile tea for Mother's Day. "It'll help you remember your dreams," he'd said with an odd seriousness. I'd laughed it off, but drank it every night for a year. Waking each morning with strange, vivid memories of places I'd never been, faces I'd never seen. The control panel beeped. Dr. Foles let out a strangled cry. They're coming online anyway, the dampener's failing. Indeed, the Generation 38 specimen's eyes were beginning to open, not the void-like blackness of Emily's possession, but a chilling, uniform amber. One by one, their pods hissed open. That's when I noticed the markings above each pod. Not numbers. Dates. The most recent one read, M. Wilkinson, 6/15/2023. My birthday. Dr. Foles followed my gaze and went deathly pale. Oh, God! They weren't making a new generation. Her prosthetic hand clenched. They were making replacements. A wet cough drew our attention to the chamber's far corner. Jessica slumped against the wall, her designer clothes torn and bloodied, one hand clutching a gaping wound in her abdomen. But she was smiling. "You finally understand," she rasped. Generation 38 isn't about creating new life. It's about extending it. She gestured weakly to the pods. Elite clients pay billions to transfer their consciousness into these perfected bodies when their original ones fail. Her bloody fingers twitched toward Emily, but we needed a neural bridge stable enough to handle the transfers. That's what your family's been providing for 3 decades. The first of the Generation 38 specimens stepped from his pod, moving with uncanny grace. His face was disturbingly familiar. Congressman Eli Brandt, who had died in a car accident 6 months ago. Dr. Foles raised her gun, but Jessica laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. Too late. The first wave is already out in the world. And Margaret, her eyes locked onto mine with terrifying intensity. You've been hosting Subject Zero's consciousness since your appendectomy at 21. That's why Emily bonded to you. She recognized you. The floor seemed to drop away. Those strange dreams, the inexplicable skills that surfaced in emergencies, the way I'd always known things I shouldn't. Emily's small hand gripped mine. "Grandma," she whispered urgently. "The tea? Remember the tea." And suddenly I did. Not the chamomile. The other tea. The one my mother had made me drink every morning as a child. The one that tasted like copper and earth. The one that came from the black fluid now pooling at our feet. The black fluid lapping at my shoes suddenly surged upward in twisting tendrils, wrapping around my legs like living vines. Dr. Foles grabbed my arm, her prosthetic fingers digging painfully into my flesh as she tried to pull me back, but the substance held fast, not restraining me, but connecting to me. The moment it made contact with my bare skin, a firestorm of memories erupted in my mind, each one sharper and clearer than my own lived experiences. A laboratory in 1978, a woman strapped to a steel table, her screams muffled by a leather gag as technicians injected the first neural serum into her spine. A boardroom in 1992, wealthy men in tailored suits bidding millions for the chance at immortality, while that same woman, now withered and hollow-eyed, was kept sedated in a glass cell beneath their feet. My own hands, younger and unlined, stroking the hair of a sobbing little boy who called me Mom, but whose face I didn't recognize, Michael, but not the Michael I remembered. Margaret. Dr. Foles' voice sounded distant, warped, as if heard through water. "Fight it! That's not you." But the truth was worse. It was me, just not the me I knew. The black tendrils reached my face, slipping into my nostrils, my mouth, my ears with an intimacy that bypassed disgust and went straight to primal terror. The last thing I saw before my vision went dark was Emily's tiny hands pressing against my cheeks, her tear-filled eyes reflecting the amber glow of the awakening Generation 38 hosts as she whispered 3 words that shattered the last remnants of my denial. "Remember the fireflies." Then the world exploded in light. The summer heat clung to my skin like a second layer as I knelt beside the creek behind our farmhouse, my 7-year-old hands cupped around a flickering jar of fireflies. Michael, just a toddler then, giggled as their golden light played across his face. "See how they glow?" I whispered, not recognizing my own voice. "That's how you'll find me when they try to make us forget. Look for the light that doesn't belong." Little Michael pressed his tiny finger against the glass. "Like your specialty?" A twig snapped behind us. Before I could turn, a needle bit into my neck. The last thing I heard before darkness took me was my own voice screaming, not in fear, but in rage, in a language no human throat should have been able to produce. Present day. I came back to myself screaming that same unnatural sound, the black fluid now fully integrated into my body, swirling beneath my skin like living tattoos. The Generation 38 hosts had frozen in place, their amber eyes fixed on me with something akin to religious awe. Jessica was crawling toward us, her blood leaving a slick trail across the floor. "You weren't supposed to remember," she gasped. "The tea was supposed to keep Zero suppressed." Emily stepped between us, her small body trembling but her voice steady. "You messed up," she said with eerie calm. "You thought putting part of her in Grandma would make me bond faster. But memories are like fireflies. They find their way back." Dr. Foles suddenly grabbed Jessica by the hair, pressing her gun to the younger woman's temple. "How many are already activated?" she demanded. Jessica's laugh bubbled with blood. "Enough." Then the chamber's emergency lights flashed crimson as an alarm blared to life, followed by a voice over PA system that turned my blood to ice. "Global activation sequence initiated. All Generation 38 units. Proceed to extraction." The amber-eyed hosts moved as one toward the exit, their movements perfectly synchronized. Congressman Brandt paused just long enough to smile at me with teeth that were slightly too sharp. "Don't worry, Margaret," he said in a voice that wasn't his own. "We'll take good care of your world." Then the ground heaved violently, throwing us all to the floor as explosions rocked the facility above. The ceiling began to collapse in a rain of debris and dust. Emily's small hand found mine in the chaos, her fingers intertwining with mine in a pattern that triggered another flood of memories. This time not the past, but the future. A future we could still stop, if we moved now. The collapsing ceiling rained concrete and twisted metal around us as Emily's fingers tightened around mine in that peculiar pattern. 3 squeezes, a pause, then 2 more, unlocking memories that didn't belong to my lifetime. Suddenly I knew things. The location of a hidden ventilation shaft behind the dais. The code to disable facility's self-destruct, 5-12-0-7-19. Even the sickening realization that the black fluid now coursing through my veins contained millions of nanoscale transmitters. The same transmitters humming in the Generation 38 hosts now fleeing to the surface. Dr. Foles dragged Jessica's limp body toward us, the woman's breathing now shallow and wet. She's got a neural link implant. She shouted over the roaring chaos. "If we can access it." Emily let go of my hand and pressed her palm against Jessica's forehead. The dying woman's eyes flew open, her back arching as her irises flooded black. When she spoke, the voices of dozens tumbled from her mouth in a chaotic chorus. "Chicago, Dubai, Shanghai, activation points. The replacements are already in position." A massive support beam crashed down beside us, spraying sparks. The entire chamber was coming apart. I grabbed Emily and pulled her toward the hidden vent I now remembered, Dr. Foles close behind. Jessica's body went limp, her final breath carrying 2 ominous words. "White Christmas." The ventilation shaft was tight, the metal scorching hot from nearby fires. We crawled like rats through the smoke, Emily coughing violently ahead of me. The shaft branched unexpectedly, left toward the surface, right descending deeper. Emily went right without hesitation. "Wrong way," Dr. Foles croaked. Emily's reply chilled me. "We need the cradle to call the fireflies home." The shaft opened into a circular chamber, so ancient the walls were carved stone rather than concrete. At its center stood a single pod unlike the others. Cruder, older, its glass frosted with decades of condensation. Inside floated a skeletal female figure connected to dozens of decaying tubes, her skull fitted with corroded metal implants. The original Subject Zero, and she was awake. Her eyelids peeled back with a wet tearing sound, revealing eyes that were entirely black, just like Emily's during her episodes. The moment those eyes locked onto me, my vision doubled. I saw myself from outside my body, a middle-aged woman covered in soot and blood, face contorted in horror, while simultaneously seeing to the pod's glass, looking out at my own terrified reflection. "Daughter." The word vibrated through my bones, spoken by Zero but also by me, my mouth moving without my consent. "You carry my light. Now release it." Emily stepped forward and placed both hands on the pod. The facility's dying lights flickered in rhythm with her words. By blood and bone and borrowed time, I returned what once was mine. A shockwave of energy blasted outward, throwing Dr. Foles against the wall. The pod shattered. The black fluid in my veins burned as it rushed toward my fingertips, pouring out in glowing strands that connected to Emily, to Dr. Foles, even to the crumbling walls themselves. Outside, I knew with sudden certainty, every activated Generation 38 host had just frozen mid-stride as the Firefly network activated, because they weren't just transmitters, they were receivers. And Subject Zero had just taken back what was stolen. The moment Subject Zero's skeletal hand broke through the shattered pod glass, time itself seemed to fracture. My body became a battleground. Margaret's memories clashing violently against a flood of Zero's consciousness, surging through black fluid in my veins. I saw double. The crumbling ancient chamber superimposed with visions of a sun-drenched courtyard where younger Zero me, her, taught children to weave light between their fingers like liquid gold. Emily stood at the epicenter of the maelstrom, her small body glowing with the same eerie radiance as the strands connecting us all, her voice somehow cutting through the chaos with terrifying clarity. "They're waking up?" Dr. Foles dragged herself upright, her prosthetic arms sparking violently. "The host," she gasped. "Look." The glowing strands pulsated like live wires, each throb carrying flashes of thousand perspectives. Generation 38 hosts staggering in Chicago boardrooms, collapsing on Dubai streets, clawing at their heads in Shanghai airports as something inside them fought back. The Firefly network wasn't just freezing them. It was reversing the transfers. Real memories flooding back into stolen bodies. Zero's corpse-like fingers closed around my wrist, her touch burning like dry ice. The T was never suppressant. Her voice echoed in my skull. It was a delivery system, seeding pieces of me across generations until we could strike back. Her black eyes reflected the swirling light, showing me the terrible truth. Every dose I consumed, every cup my mother had forced on me, every birthday tea for Michael, all containing fragments of Zero's consciousness, lying dormant until the network activated. Emily suddenly screamed, a sound of pure agony, as the glow around her intensified to blinding levels. The strand connecting her to Zero and me turned white-hot, burning through her pajamas to reveal circuit-like scars covering her small body. Not surgery marks, growth patterns. She wasn't just a bridge between minds. She was a final vessel. Dr. Foles lunged forward with broken pipe, aiming for Zero's skull. "She'll kill the child," she shouted. But I knew better. Zero wasn't trying to possess Emily. She was trying to save her. I caught Dr. Foles' arm mid-swing, my grip inhumanly strong. "Look closer," I gasped, forcing her to see what the black fluid now showed me. The truth hidden beneath Emily's skin. Her bones were too dense, her neural pathways too complex. She wasn't just a designed human. She was the first successful hybrid. Zero's voice merged with mine as we spoke in unison. They built her perfect the transfer process, but we hacked their design. The chamber trembled as another explosion rocked the facility above. Chunks of ceiling collapsed, one narrowly missing Emily. Zero's grip on my wrist tightened convulsively, her skeletal body beginning to disintegrate as she poured the last of her energy into the network. "The hosts are fighting back," she whispered, "but the window is closing. You must choose." A gunshot rang out. Jessica stood in the doorway, her abdomen wound gaping, a smoking pistol in her hand. The bullet had taken Dr. Foles clean through the throat. As the doctor collapsed, gurgling, Jessica's other hand rose, clutching a small detonator. "White Christmas protocol initiated," she rasped. Then her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in them. "You don't understand. If the hosts regain control, they'll..." Emily moved faster than thought. 1 second, she was across the room. The next, her small hands had plunged into Jessica's chest with a wet crunch. The dying woman's mouth opened in silent shock as Emily pulled, not on flesh, but on the glowing strands now visible inside her body. "You don't get to leave," Emily whispered in that haunting multi-voice. Then she ripped Jessica's consciousness straight through her ribcage in a burst of golden light. Jessica's corpse hit the ground with a wet thud, the detonator clattering from her lifeless fingers. For one terrifying heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the entire facility convulsed as secondary explosions erupted throughout the compound. Not the clean demolition of charges, but the messy, spreading destruction of fuel lines and chemical stores igniting. The shockwave sent Emily tumbling backward, her hands still glowing with stolen consciousness, the light now pulsing erratically as the Firefly network destabilized. Dr. Foles' body spasmed at my feet, her remaining hand clawing at her throat wound as she choked on her own blood. I dropped to my knees, instinctively reaching for her, only to have her grab my wrist with shocking strength. Her lips moved soundlessly, but the black fluid in my veins translated, carrying her final message directly into my mind like a scream across a vast distance. The protocol isn't for destroying evidence. It's for activating the fail-safe hosts. Their sleeper agents, Margaret, the real ones, never came back from them. Her body arched violently as a fresh burst of golden light erupted from Emily, the strand connecting us all flaring bright enough to bleach the color from the world. When my vision cleared, Dr. Foles was gone, not just dead, but empty, her eyes staring vacantly at nothing. The same hollow stare I'd seen on Michael's face when I found him dying. Subject Zero's skeletal hand tightened around my other wrist, her voice now barely a whisper in my mind. "She's right. The replacements you stopped were just the first wave. The sleepers are already in place, walking bombs waiting for their trigger." Her black eyes flicked to Emily, who was now curled into a fetal position, her small body shuddering as she struggled to contain the stolen consciousness she'd ripped from Jessica. "Your granddaughter is the only key to stopping them, but using her that way will..." A chunk of ceiling collapsed onto Zero's fragile body, crushing her chest in an explosion of dust and brittle bones. The moment her grip broke, the vision ceased, but not before one final image seared itself into my brain. Emily standing at the center of a massive explosion, her body dissolving into light as she rewrote the sleeper agent's programming on a cellular level. The cost of saving the world would be my granddaughter's life. Emily suddenly gasped, her back arching as she vomited a stream of that same black fluid that now ran through my veins. It pooled on the floor, then crawled toward me like a living thing. When it touched my skin, I saw Michael, age 12, crying as he mixed the black powder into my favorite tea. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, "but we need you to forget again." Jessica, younger and softer, pressing a stethoscope to Emily's tiny chest. Vitals stable. Neural integration at 97%. She'll be ready for transfer by generation 39. Dr. Foles, both arms still flesh, typing frantically at a console as alarms blared. The subjects are waking up prematurely. If we don't suppress Zero's influence. The memories cut off as Emily collapsed, her breathing ragged. The facility's self-destruct countdown blared to the crumbling walls. T-minus 5 minutes to detonation. I grabbed Emily and ran for the ascending ventilation shaft, the black fluid guiding my steps even as my mind reeled from revelations. Michael had known. Jessica had been part of it from the start. Even Dr. Foles had participated until something changed her mind. And Emily had always been meant to die. The shaft opened onto a nightmare. The forest outside burned. The trees reduced to skeletal silhouettes against the flames. The surviving Generation 38 hosts wandered aimlessly, their amber eyes now flickering between awareness and confusion as the Firefly network battled the sleeper programming buried in their DNA. One host, a woman in the tattered remains of a business suit, suddenly grabbed her head and screamed. "They're in the water supply? The trigger is..." Her skull exploded, not metaphorically, literally. Chunks of bone and brain matter showered the clearing as host began detonating, their bodies erupting in sprays of gore and a fine, glowing mist that hung in the air like radioactive fog. Emily stirred in my arms, her voice barely audible over the carnage. "The cradle, we have to go back." But the ground beneath us gave way before I could respond, swallowing us whole into darkness. The earth swallowed us in a roar of collapsing soil and snapping roots, the world above disappearing in a shower of dirt and debris. I clutched Emily to my chest as we fell, bracing for the bone-shattering impact that never came. Instead, we plunged into ice-cold water, the shock of it driving the breath from my lungs. The black fluid in my veins reacted instantly, forming a protective cocoon around us as we were swept through subterranean currents, the darkness so absolute I couldn't tell if my eyes were open or closed. When we finally surfaced, gasping and choking, it was in a cavern so vast the echoes of our coughing bounced back at us from unseen walls. The water glowed with an eerie bioluminescence, illuminating ancient carvings that covered every inch of the cavern. Not the crisp, clinical markings of the facility above, but rough, desperate etchings in the same pattern as Emily's circuit-like scars. "They're memories," Emily whispered, her voice echoing strangely. From before the first generation, the carvings told a story in fragmented images. A village, a plague, a desperate bargain with something other. And the first transfer, not of consciousness, but of souls. The black fluid in my veins surged in recognition, carried with a flood of sensations. Cold stone beneath my knees, the coppery taste of a promised sacrifice, the weight of a child in my arms that wasn't mine to give, not subject Zero's memories. Mine, because I hadn't just hosted fragments of Zero's consciousness. I was her, the original, the one who'd made the deal to save her dying village 3 centuries ago. The realization should have shattered me. Instead, it settled like a stone in my gut, the truth I'd been running from since childhood finally catching up. The tea, the strange dreams, the inexplicable knowledge, all pieces of a past life I'd been forced to forget over and over as the experiment evolved beyond its original purpose. Emily's small hand touched my cheek, her eyes reflecting the cavern's glow. "You remember now," she said softly, "what you promised them." The ground trembled, sending ripples across the underground lake. Distant explosions still rocked the facility above, but beneath our feet, something far older stirred. The water began to recede, revealing steps carved into the cavern floor. At their base lay a stone altar, and atop it, a cradle. Not the high-tech pod from the facility. A simple wooden thing, its surface worn smooth by time. Empty. Waiting. Emily slipped from my arms and approached it with eerie certainty, her bare feet leaving glowing prints on the damp stone. "This is where it started," she whispered, "where you gave him the first child." A fresh tremor shook the cavern, this time accompanied by a sound like 1,000 voices screaming in unison. The ceiling cracked, spraying dust and rubble. Somewhere above, the sleeper hosts were activating en masse, their detonations triggering chain reactions in the modified water supplies. We were out of time. Emily climbed into the cradle and lay down, folded her hands over her chest like a corpse in a coffin. The moment her skin touched the wood, the carvings on the walls flared to life, the bioluminescence intensifying to a blinding radiance. "It's okay, Grandma," she said as the light swallowed her whole. "You don't have to keep your promise anymore." Then the cavern screamed, and the world went white. The blinding white light resolved into a vision so vivid it erased the crumbling cavern. I stood in a sun-drenched village square, where the air smelled of wood smoke and baking bread, where the cobblestones underfoot were worn smooth by generations of barefoot children. But the idyllic scene curdled at the edges, boarded-up homes marked with bloody handprints, the distant sound of wailing from a church, the too familiar coppery scent of the plague that had come to my village in the summer of 1692. A woman who wore my face but not my years knelt before the ancient oak at the square center, her hands clenched around a crude iron pendant, the first iteration of the Celtic knot. Her tears fell onto the roots as she whispered the words that would damn us all. "Take me instead, but spare the children." The memory wasn't mine. It was hers. Subject zeros. No. Margaret Wilkins, my many greats-grandmother, whose name and face I'd inherited along with the curse she'd bargained for. The tree's roots had stirred that long-ago night, uncoiling like skeletal fingers to brush her tear-streaked face. The deal was struck not with scientists or soldiers, but with whatever slumbered beneath that oak. It asked for one thing in exchange for halting the plague: a firstborn child from each generation. Not their lives, their voices, their memories. The roots plunged into her mouth that night, drinking her screams and leaving behind the first black fluid, a living archive of stolen consciousness. The village children recovered, but the infants born afterward, they were different, quiet, watchful, as if something behind their eyes was listening. The vision shattered as Emily's scream echoed to the cavern, the wooden cradle now glowing like a furnace, the carvings on the walls pulsed in time with her convulsions, the ancient symbols rearranging themselves into a single phrase repeated endlessly. The debt must be paid. I lunged the cradle, but the black fluid in my veins turned against me, rooting me to the spot. It wasn't just inside me. It remembered me, every Margaret who'd come before, each one forced to forget the bargain as they fed their firstborn to the thing beneath the tree. The tea, the injections, the medical treatments, all ways to make us forget what we'd agreed to. Emily's back arched violently, her mouth opening in a silent scream as light poured from her eyes, her nose, her pores. The cavern trembled, not from explosions above, but from something awakening below. The ground split between my feet, revealing yawning darkness and the glint of something massive shifting in the depths. Then, a whisper, not from Emily, not from the thing below, from inside me, a voice I hadn't heard in decades. "Mom." Michael's voice, not the Michael who died in that upstairs bedroom, but the child I'd raised, the real one, the one whose memories had been overwritten when the debt came due. The black fluid wasn't just Zero's consciousness. It was a graveyard, a living archive of every stolen child. And they were waking up. Emily's glowing hands shot out, grasping mine with impossible strength. When she spoke, it was with the voices of hundreds. "We can end the cycle, but you have to choose." The ground heaved, the fissure widening as something vast and hungry began to rise. The fissure yawned wider, exhaling a breath of air so cold it crystallized on my skin. Emily's grip became a vice, her fingers fusing with mine as the black fluid in our veins synchronized, her light and my darkness swirling together in a helix pattern that snaked up our arms. The voices of stolen children crescendoed in my skull, their whispers coalescing into a single deafening truth. The entity below wasn't just taking memories. It was building something. The cavern walls dissolved into another vision, this time of a vast, organic network pulsing beneath the Earth's crust, tendrils extending across continents like mycelium. Each donation point, the oak tree, the observatory, the modern facility, was merely a taproot feeding into this colossal system. And at each node hung thousands of glowing pods, each containing a suspended child, their faces peaceful in artificial sleep, generation after generation of firstborns, preserved but hollowed out, their memories extracted like marrow from bones. Emily's voice cut through the vision, strained but clear. "They're not dead, just repurposed." Her eyes flickered between their normal blue and that endless black as she fought to maintain control. The entity feeds on human experience, our joys, our griefs, to grow its own consciousness. We were never saving anyone. We were farming. The ground trembled as something massive shifted in the depths below. Stone cracked as a tendril thicker than an oak trunk erupted from the fissure, its surface studded with blinking nodes that resembled human eyes frozen mid-blink. It hovered over the cradle, dripping black fluid that burned through stone like acid. Then it spoke, not in words, but in a vibration that rearranged my bones. The dead is overdue. The pressure of centuries collapsed onto my chest. This wasn't just about Emily. The entire lineage of Wilkins' firstborns, stretching back to that desperate woman at the oak tree, had been installments on a loan we never understood, and now the creditor had come to collect the principal. Michael's voice surfaced again from the chorus of my mind, clearer now. "Mom, listen! The black fluid isn't just a transmitter. It's a bridge. You can cross over." A new understanding detonated in my brain. The T, the injections, the constant memory suppression. They weren't just to make us forget. They were maintenance on the connection, keeping the bridge between worlds intact so the entity could keep feeding. Emily suddenly spasmed, her back arching until I heard vertebrae crack. The light pouring from her mouth formed shapes, familiar faces. My mother, my grandmother, generations of Wilkins women who'd made the same terrible choice. And behind them, flickering like a dying flame, the face of my real son, the Michael they'd overwritten. "You have to choose," the voices chorused. "Break the bridge or cross it. But hurry! She can't hold them much longer." The massive tendril descended toward the cradle, its tip splitting open into something resembling a flower made of human teeth. Emily's skin began to split along those circuit-like scars, golden light bleeding through the cracks. She wasn't just a vessel. She was a final conduit, and the entity meant to take her whole. The cavern trembled as a monstrous tendril hovered over Emily's convulsing body, its tooth-like petals dripping black fluid that sizzled against the ancient cradle. The voices of the stolen children rose to a deafening crescendo inside my skull. Not screaming, but singing, a discordant lullaby that vibrated in my teeth. The black fluid in my veins surged toward Emily, forming glowing filaments between us that pulsed in time with the song. Then, a hand gripped my shoulder. Not Emily's, not the entity's. Michael's. His touch carried the warmth of childhood memories. Scraped knees soothed, nightmares comforted, tiny hands pressed against mine as he learned to ride a bicycle. The real Michael, not the overwritten shell Jessica had manipulated, stood beside me in the cavern, his form shimmering with the same golden light that was tearing Emily apart. "It's not a debt, Mom," he whispered. "It's a loop, and Emily's the key to breaking it." The vision shifted violently, plunging me into the entity's perspective. Not some alien monster, but something far worse. The first Wilkins child. Not Margaret's baby, but one much older. A colonial infant who died in that original plague, its consciousness preserved by the desperate bargain its mother struck with the oak tree. The entity wasn't harvesting us. It was trying to rebuild itself, generation after generation of stolen memories, all funneling into the reconstruction of that first lost child. The black fluid was its bloodstream, the pods were its organs, and Emily was its heart. The realization struck like lightning. The circuit-like scars weren't implants. They were sutures. The same pattern as the stitches on a 17th century burial shroud. Michael's grip tightened as the entity's tendril descended toward Emily. "You have to cross over," he urged, "not to pay the debt, to collect it." The filaments between Emily and me thickened, forming a bridge of crackling energy. Through it, I glimpsed the other side. Not some hellscape, but a sunlit meadow where hundreds of children played in silence. The original village, the real first generation, waiting to go home. Emily's body began to disintegrate, her flesh unraveling into golden threads that wove themselves into the bridge. She wasn't dying. She was completing the circuit. The entity's tendrils shuddered as it made contact with the disintegrating cradle, its human-like eyes rolling back in ecstasy or agony. I couldn't tell which. The cavern walls peeled away like old wallpaper, revealing the massive network beneath. Pulsating tendrils stretching into darkness, each one terminating in a pod, holding a stolen child. Michael pushed me toward the bridge. "Walk into the light. Mom, bring them home." But as I stepped forward, a new voice cut through the chaos. One I hadn't heard since childhood. My mother's. Margaret and Wilkins. She whispered from the depths of memory. "Remember the tea. Not the black fluid. The other tea. The one she made me drink every morning. The one that tasted like honey and sunlight. The one that came from the oak tree's blossoms." The missing piece slammed into place. The original Margaret hadn't just made a bargain. She left an antidote. The memory of that honey-sweet tea flooded my mouth, the taste triggering a cascade of long-buried recollections. morning sunlight to the farmhouse curtains, my mother's work-roughened hands pressing the warm mug into mine, the way she watched me drink it with an intensity that bordered on desperation. "Every drop, Maggie," she'd whisper, "even the bits at the bottom." Now I understood why. The oak blossoms weren't just part of the bargain. They were its loophole. The black fluid in my veins recoiled as the memory intensified. The filaments connected me to Emily flickering gold where they'd been dark. The entity's massive tendril spasmed above us, its ice-studded surface blinking erratically as if struggling to focus. The children singing stuttered, their unified voices fracturing into individual whispers, names, dates, fragments of lost lives. Michael's ghostly hand tightened on my shoulder. "The first Margaret didn't just beg for mercy at that tree," he whispered urgently. "She grafted it." The vision came swift and brutal. My many-greats-grandmother in her threadbare colonial dress, carving a single sliver from a healthy apple tree and binding it to the plague-stricken oak with strips of her own hair. The blossoms that appeared the next spring weren't the oaks. They were hybrids, bearing the apple tree's sweetness where there should have been bitterness. The entity shrieked, a sound that liquefied the cavern walls, revealing the nightmare beneath. Not some alien horror, but colossal, malformed child, its body stitched together from generations of stolen firstborns, its veins pulsing with the same black fluid that ran through mine. It wasn't evil. It was broken. And Emily's unraveling body was the final stitch holding together. The golden bridge stretched before me, its surface rippling with faces. Not just the stolen children, but all the Wilkins women who'd come before, their hands outstretched as if waiting to pull me across. My mother stood foremost among them, holding a steaming teacup. "It's not poison or cure," she whispered. "It's choice." The cavern disintegrated around us as I stepped onto the bridge, the entity's wails shaking the foundations of both worlds. With each step, the black fluid purged from my veins, replaced by that remembered sunlight taste. The stolen children's whispers coalesced into a single word, home. But as I reached for them, a new horror unfolded. Emily's nearly dissolved form wasn't just building the bridge. She was becoming it. Her remaining I locked onto mine, filled with love so vast it hurt. "You have to take them all," she whispered. "Even the one who started this." The entity's true form loomed behind her, not a monster, but a sobbing colonial child, its stitches bursting as it reached for the light, and in its grip, the first thing it had ever stolen, a tiny, glowing soul that looked exactly like me. The moment my fingers brushed that tiny, glowing soul, the stolen piece of First Margaret, the bridge beneath my feet screamed, not with pain but with recognition, the golden light flaring so intensely it vaporized the remaining black fluid in my veins. The cavern's illusion shattered completely, revealing the true horror beneath. We weren't standing on stone, but on a vast, pulsing membrane stretched over an infinite void, the entity's skin, grown from centuries of harvested memories. Emily's nearly dissolved form flickered like a candle in the wind, her remaining eye fixed on me with desperate love. "It's not just taking them home," she whispered through the voices of 1,000 stolen children. "It's giving back." The entity stitched together child form convulsed, its crude sutures bursting as golden light poured from its seams. With each rupture, a memory escaped, not just of the taken children, but of their mother's grief. The first Margaret's agony as she handed her baby to the roots. My own mother's tears as she mixed the blossom tea with shaking hands. Michael's last words before they overrode him. "Tell Mom I love her." The bridge beneath us began to dissolve, not collapsing but unraveling stitch by stitch in the same pattern as Emily's scars. With each thread that came loose, a child's face floated free from the entity's monstrous form, their eyes clearing as they remembered who they'd been. The colonial infant, my grandmother's stillborn first child, the Michael I'd lost without knowing. But as the last stitches gave way, the entity did something unimaginable. It resisted, not to keep them trapped, to push them away. The realization struck like lightning. This broken child thing had never been our jailer. It was the first prisoner. The original bargain hadn't been to save the village from plague. It had been to save the oak tree from whatever slept inside it. The colonial Margaret hadn't grafted the apple branch to create a loophole. She'd done it to feed the prisoner something sweeter than despair. The golden bridge trembled as the entity's form finally ruptured completely, releasing a shockwave of memories that rewrote everything I knew. The oak tree had been a prison. The plague had been its bars weakening. And the first Margaret hadn't sacrificed her child to the tree. She'd offered it to the wounded thing trapped inside, not as payment, as company. Now, centuries later, that same wounded thing was trying to give them all back. including the piece of me it had taken first. The moment the entity's final stitch tore apart, time itself seemed to fracture. The golden bridge dissolved into thousands of luminous threads, each carrying a child's consciousness back to its rightful place in history. The colonial infant's soul brushed my fingertips, not cold as I expected, but warm, living, carrying the scent of apple blossoms and fresh-turned earth. As it passed into the light, the cavern's remaining walls crumbled completely, revealing the truth beneath all illusions. We stood in the hollow of an enormous dead oak, its blackened ribs curving high above us like a cathedral's ruins. And at its center, pulsing weakly among the roots, lay the real prisoner, not the stitched-together child thing, but something far older, a being of writhing light and shadow, its form constantly shifting between human and something else entirely. Bound to the tree by chains of rusted iron inscribed with markings that hurt to look at. The original Margaret's iron pendant, the first Celtic knot, lay broken at its feet. "You finally came," it whispered in a voice like wind through dead leaves. Not to me, to Emily. My granddaughter's nearly dissolved form flickered, her single remaining eye widening in recognition. "I know you," she breathed, not in the many voices of the stolen children, but in her own pure tone. The being's light intensified as it strained against its chains. "You walked the in-between places before this flesh. You whispered the secret to the first mother when she wept at this tree." A new memory exploded behind my eyes. Not mine, not the first Margaret's, but Emily's. A lifetime before this one. A death by drowning. A promise carved into apple wood and buried beneath an oak. "I'll come back. Wait for me." The being's chains rattled as it extended a shimmering hand toward Emily. "The debt was never yours to pay. It was mine, for stealing your life first." The final, horrifying truth crashed over me. There had been no original bargain. No plague. Only a grieving primordial thing that had snatched a human child from a riverbank, Emily in a past life, and tried to replace her with generations of stolen souls. The first Margaret hadn't been a victim. She'd been a savior. Her graph wasn't just apple wood. It was a piece of the drowned girl's burial marker, carrying enough of her essence to begin undoing the damage. And now, after centuries of suffering, the circle was complete. The being's chain shattered as Emily reached for it, her unraveling body the key to its release. Light erupted, not from them, but from between them, the true in-between place where all lost things wait. The last thing I saw before the light consumed everything was the being's form shifting one final time, into a perfect mirror of Emily's face. Not to mock her, to apologize. The blinding light resolved into a silence, so profound it felt like the world holding its breath. I found myself kneeling in soft grass beneath the reconstructed oak tree. Not the hollowed, cursed version from the cavern, but a thriving giant with healthy bark and a canopy thick with both oak leaves and apple blossoms. The air smelled of rain and fresh earth, the last remnants of black fluid drying on my skin, like old ink flaking away. Emily lay curled at the tree's base, whole again but different. Her circuit-like scars now delicate silver tracings that shimmered when she breathed. The primordial being was gone, but its final gift remained. Scattered around us like fallen fruit were hundreds of smooth stones, each engraved with name and date. The real grave markers for every stolen child, finally laid to rest. I reached for Emily, but my hands passed through her like mist. Her voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "It's okay, Grandma. I'm not gone, just mending the holes it left behind." Her form flickered, and for a terrifying moment, I saw through her to the other side. A sunlit meadow where the freed children played, their laughter soundless but radiant. Michael stood among them, whole and unburdened, tending a small apple sapling. Then the vision shifted, and I saw the other aftermath, the real world above ground. The surviving generation, 38 hosts wander in confusion, their amber eyes cleared of programming. The black fluid and water supplies had neutralized into harmless sediment. And Jessica lived, not as herself, but as a hollowed-out vessel kneeling in the ruins of the facility, her mouth moving soundlessly as she traced the same stitch patterns Emily once bore into her own arms. The entity's final curse, to become what she created. A warm presence settled beside me. Not Emily or Michael, but the first Margaret, not a ghost, but a memory given form by the tree's roots. She pressed something into my palm, a tiny acorn sprouting both oak and apple leaves. "The debt is paid," she whispered, "but the keeping goes on." Before I could respond, the world tilted violently. I woke gasping in a hospital bed, for lines tethering me to beeping machines. Morning light streamed through the windows, painting everything in gold. A nurse rushed in, her mouth moving, but the only word I caught was miracle. On the bedside table sat 2 items, a steaming mug of chamomile tea and that morning's newspaper. The headline screamed, "Global Epidemic of False Memories. Thousands report recovered childhoods." Below it, a smaller headline, "Missing child found alive in storm drain. Claims the lady in the tree sent her home." And beside the paper, half hidden under the teacup, a single apple blossom, fresh as the day it was picked. The hospital room dissolved into chaos as doctors rushed in, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of medical jargon and hushed astonishment. I tried to sit up, but my body felt like it had been hollowed out and refilled with something both lighter and more fragile than before. The nurse kept repeating miracle like a prayer, her fingers trembling as she checked my 4 lines. Outside the window, the world continued spinning as if nothing had changed. Cars honked in the distance, a lawnmower hummed several floors below, and somewhere a child laughed with the unself-conscious joy only children possess. But everything had changed. The newspaper's date caught my eye, June 15th, my birthday. Exactly 1 year since I come home early to find Michael dying. The chamomile tea on the bedside table steamed gently, its scent triggering a visceral memory of the oak apple hybrid's blossoms. When I reached for it, my sleeve fell back to reveal new markings on my forearm. Silver tracings like Emily's scars, but forming a different pattern. Roots and branches intertwined with names I somehow knew belonged to freed children. A commotion in the hallway snapped my attention to the door just as it burst open. A harried-looking social worker entered, shepherding a group of children whose ages ranged from toddlers to teens. Their eyes, all that same impossible shade of amber, now clear of programming, locked onto me with eerie recognition. The oldest, a girl about 14 with a jagged scar across her throat, spoke first. She says, "Thank you," and to plant the seed where the old tree used to be. Before I could respond, the monitors beside my bed erupted in alarm. My heartbeat spiked as the children simultaneously reached into their pockets and produced acorns identical to the one the first Margaret had given me. The social worker gasped as the children placed them on my bedside table, where they immediately began to sprout, tiny roots weaving through the newspaper's headlines. Global memory crisis continues. Millions report vivid dreams of another life. Scientific breakthrough. Unknown DNA sequence found in water supply vanishes overnight. Mass suicides among elite. Prominent figures claim they came to collect. The oldest girl leaned close, her whisper carrying the faintest echo of Emily's voice. It's not over. The ones who started this, the real architects, they're still out there, and they know you have the seed. As if summoned by her words, the hospital window shattered inward, not from wind or debris, but from a bullet. The social worker screamed as the children reacted with inhuman speed, forming a protective circle around my bed. Outside, black SUVs screeched to a halt in the parking lot, their tinted windows hiding the faces of those inside. The monitors flatlined, not because I was dying, but because something far worse was coming. The first Margaret's voice whispered through the leaves of the sprouting acorns. "The debt is paid, Margaret, but the war is just beginning." The moment the bullet shattered the hospital window, time seemed to fracture. The freed children moved as one, their amber eyes flashing silver as they raised their hands in unison. The air crackled with energy as the bullet stopped midair, inches from my forehead, suspended in a web of glowing filaments that hadn't been there a second before. But the real shock came next. The oldest girl, the one with the scarred throat, smiled. Not a child's smile. Something ancient. Something familiar. "Hello, Grandma," she said in Jessica's voice. My blood turned to ice. Before I could react, the hospital walls breathed. The cracks and plaster spread like veins, blooming into intricate patterns that matched the scars on my arms. The acorns on the table sprouted faster, their roots digging into the floor, the ceiling, the air itself, weaving a barrier between us and the armed figures spilling from the SUVs outside. The girl tilted her head, her expression shifting between child and something else. "You didn't think it'd be that easy, did you?" she asked, her voice now a blend of Jessica's cool malice and Emily's softness. The entity wasn't the enemy, Margaret. It was a prisoner, just like us. The real architects? They'd been hiding in plain sight. In the government, the labs, the hospitals. As if to prove her point, the heart monitor's flatline suddenly jumped. Not with a heartbeat, with a voice. Subject 0 reactivated. Containment protocol initiated. The doctors and nurses in the hallway froze. Then, in perfect unison, their heads snapped toward me. their eyes flooding black. The girl laughed, a sound like breaking glass. They'd been inside them all along. The roots from the acorn surged, impaling the possessed hospital staff with terrifying precision. But instead of blood, black fluid spilled out, the same as the entities, but wrong. Thinner, colder, artificial. The girl grabbed my hand, her touch burning. The seed isn't just for planting. It's a key to wake the others. Then she pressed something into my palm, a tiny, withered apple blossom. The last one. Eat it. Outside, the SUVs exploded, not from fire, but from within, as if something had torn them apart from the inside. The freed children didn't flinch. They just watched me, waiting. I hesitated. The girl's eyes softened. For a second, she looked like Emily again. "Trust me," she whispered. I ate the blossom. The world screamed.